Welcome to eFlexFX Tutorials. This is part 2 of an in-depth dive into working with motion clips. In part 2 we'll be looking at fixing common problems with motions as well as the tools available to make working with motions easier. This tutorial is focused for beginner to intermediate level or anyone needing a refresher. I'm going to start part 2 showing how to fix the problem of feet breaking through the ground plane with the native walk motion that is part of the mixed move motions. This was seen in part 1 and is worth spending some time on. So we'll go ahead and get started. And let's go to the animation, motion setting options, make sure align action motion is selected. And then we'll come over here, go to content, select the motion tab, and then the mixed moves male, and apply a walk motion. So as we take a walk, we can see that his feet are breaking through the plane every time he goes to lift his foot. It's going down below the plane. And obviously we don't want that. And so the first thing you want to do, and there's a little clearer view that he's actually going down through the plane. And if we come over to the modified tab, first thing you want to do is make sure foot contact is selected. And for some cases that would be enough to resolve the issue. And it would prevent the foot from going down. But in this case, the motion is too severe and it's still breaking the plane. It's also deforming the foot. So we don't want that, and we'll want to correct that. So let's kind of look at it here. Let's get it. And we'll start with the right leg. And so a couple things you can do. So if you select the motion and you come down to the, what did I do? Scene. There we go. We come down to the motion layer under the motion tab, and we can actually do keyframes, and it'll automatically keyframe. So sometimes for some motions it's a simple fix. We come over here to the right, motions, edit motion layer, select the right ankle, select the orbit tool, and we can rotate the foot out of the ground plane. But look what happens when we move the cursor. The foot stays incorrect. So now you would have to correct it. You can do that with the orbit tool. You can do it with the reset, and it'll put things back. And you could walk your way through. And in some cases, that will be enough. But where multiple keyframe adjustments are necessary, sometimes it can create a kind of an unnatural jittery look. So we're going to look at an easier way to do it. So we're going to select the motion again. We'll right click on it, and we're going to go to sample motion clip and sample parts optimized, and it will create a keyframes for this motion. Since we're going to be using the curve editor to fix the motion, you have to sample the clip, because if you don't sample the clip, the curve editor will be empty. So we definitely don't want to do that. You can, by the way, edit the keyframes in this view and make changes, but again, it's very difficult to keep them smooth and looking natural. So the easier way is the curve editor. We come up here to plugins. We can open the curve editor. The other way is you can just right click on the motion clip and go up to curve editor and open it that way. So take the curve editor out of the way. And you'll already see it's got some of the keyframes shown for the hip rotation. Let's bring everything, cursor back to the beginning. Let's go ahead and get a ground plane created so we can really see just how much the foot is pushing through the surface. It's a little clearer than trying to look on the grid. And that'll make it a little easier to make our adjustments more accurately. So now we got to come back up, click character, select the motion clip, and now we'll scroll down on the left, and we're going to look for the right foot, and you can see we're going to rotate it in the X plane. If you remember, the red direction is the X plane, and we can see that by the origin. And there we go. So we're going to foot rotation and X. If you use the shift and the control, you can expand out the keyframes in both the X and Y direction, so it'll give you a little more resolution. And so make easier adjustments. So as we slide the keyframes over, we can see here the problem, just looking right at the curve, is it's those keyframes right there that are pushing the foot through. So what we're going to do is we'll make changes. Now, you have a couple of different options with the curve editor. You can select a particular keyframe and you can drag it around till you get things positioned the way you want them. And you could do this with each keyframe. It does get a little more challenging to keep it smooth. And in this case, I found it's easier to be honest with you, to just delete the keyframe. So let me kind of look here at the motion, and I'm just going to, by right clicking and dragging, I can select a group of keyframes. I hit delete and they're gone. Now it still goes through, and that's because when it reset the curve, you can see it's still pushing the curve down. So what do? If you select the keyframe adjacent, we can use this tool to adjust the position of the foot, make sure it stays adjusted and stays above the ground and looks natural. Might want to make a little change here, and we can tweak it. And you can spend as much time as necessary just making minor adjustments. Now we'll come over to the keyframe on the other side, and we'll change the curve a little more. And the good thing is the rest of the motion doesn't become jittery because the rest of the motion's never changed. And what we've got now is a natural movement where we're not pushing the foot through the ground plane. Now, one thing is you'll notice the character is slightly above the ground, so we'll just take and we'll drop him down. If you go too far, you'll see the knees start to bend. And then you'll see a transform keyframe created. I'll just drag that over to frame 0. You don't actually have to, but I think it's good discipline in case you make other changes later. And now, just that easy, you can see he's walking on the ground, his feet are planted, and we just go over and throughout the motion, and again, his foot's pushing through the ground plane here. We fix it the exact same way we did the other one. We just delete and adjust keyframes and the curve between them until the foot is no longer pushed through the ground. There we go. Now I'll speed this up for the sake of time. You can see here it's the same exact process, and we're just deleting and adjusting keyframes to make sure that the foot moves in a natural walking motion and doesn't push through the ground. So and it's just trial and error. You can Control Z and undo anything that you don't like, and you can see you can also not only can you delete, but you can move keyframes. And now if we look, we've gone through, and if you look at the right leg, his foot is not at any point breaking through the ground. So now we're just going to spin him around, and we're going to do the same exact thing to the left foot. So again, we're only adjusting the x-axis, so we're going to just scroll up to the left rotation in the x, and we're going to do the same thing. We're just going to scroll through, find where he's breaking through, and we're going to make the adjustments. And again, this is just sped up. The process is exactly the same. There we go. And you can see it's not going to be perfectly smooth. I mean, these are mixed move motions. They're not motion captured, and you're not going to get a motion capture quality, but they are good for a lot of animation, and they with a little bit of work, they can be definitely useful. And there you go. You can see he's walking down the plane with no issues. And if you really think about it, using the curve editor, this took 5 minutes to fix. And one of the things I believe I covered it in the first one, you can use the collect clip and save this once you've made modifications. But we'll go ahead and now we'll look at some other motions. And if we come up here to the Smart Gallery, this is something new for IClone. I like it a lot. Select animation. In this case, the Assassin's moves. And I'm going to scroll down here. I'm going to, make sure my line actor motion. And what we're going to look at here is we're going to start combining motions. I'm going to show you some of the different ways to combine motions and then modify them and the benefits of some of the different methods. Again, I know I kind of go through these things a little bit. They take a little while, but I think it's important to kind of show you the process of how I get there and why. So we've got walk. So now we want the walk to end, and I am going to combine 3 motions here. It can be as many as you want. Essentially, going to have him crouch walk, going to have him come to a stop, and then just stay in that position. And then we'll modify those to have him look in another direction. So I'll show you how to do that, and like I said, some of the different things we can do here. So let's find an idle motion. It's quite a variety with these different packs that you can do and combine the different animations. You'll notice you don't need a lot of transition, but you'll want a little bit so it's not too abrupt. And again, you'll play around with those till it looks smooth and meets your needs. So there we go. So now he crouches, he stays looking forward. But what if we want him to look backwards? There's a couple ways of doing this. We'll start out with what I'll consider the most common way of doing it. We'll drag the cursor till we get to the point we want him to start looking back, and we'll need to set a keyframe. This way it locks in the motion where he's at, and this will be the start of where he begins to turn his head. Then we drag the cursor over, and one of the good things is you can move these around. You can drag and drop these keyframes anywhere you want. So just get it approximate, and then when you play the animation, you can adjust them closer together if you want to speed them up, further apart if you want to slow it down. Obviously, we open the edit motion layer, and we're just going to move the character around till we get him looking in the other direction. I won't spend a lot of time fine-tuning this. Again, it's more important to show the process than the actual motion. So we've got a lot of things changing here, and you'll see it's not an issue at all. Now we can play the motion, and there we go. And he kind of looks to the back. So maybe he heard something behind him, whatever the animation requires. So we've got the 3 animations, and let's play them and see how it looks. Boom, problem. When we start the idle animation, the 3rd animation, it goes right back to the original position looking forward. So if we want him to look forward, that's fine. In fact, you can really just use, if you take the transition region and you just drag it out, you can control how fast he looks back forward. And sometimes that's really all the effort it takes. But in this case, I want him to keep looking backwards. So what I do is I just take and use Control-C, and I copy the motion, and I then paste it into the first frame of the new clip. And there you go. And you can see now he'll continue to look backwards. And if you've got a simple motion, not a lot of changes, a lot of times that's all you need to do. But what if the motion had other things going on, and it wasn't just the idle motion? Maybe he was transitioning to another position. So it could get more complicated to get him back exactly where you want him. So here's what's really great is we're going to go ahead and, like I said, you can see we zeroed out, and we're going to reload the animations. And again, the more complex the series of animations, the more important these methods are. I chose fairly simple ones so it could focus more on the tools than too much on the animations themselves. But you start transitioning between standing up and running and crouching, and it can get complex to keyframe your changes. But this is an easy way to fix it. So the first thing we're going to do is we're actually going to put the 3 motions back, and we're going to set the baseline motion. We're going to make sure this motion is what we want the character to do. If there's any changes, it's not smooth, work on those here, because what we're going to do is we're going to merge the clips. So once we merge the clips, you can't really undo it. So make sure you've got the base motion that you want to change. And in this case, I think it looks good. So we can select the clips by using the shift key, or we can just use the right click and drag all three. Going to right click and we're going to merge the clips. You'll see it sets up 2 keyframes where each of the clip transitions were, and we want to get rid of those. So we're going to right click and we're going to go up here to flatten motion clip, and we're going to flatten all parts. Now we've gotten rid of all the keyframes are embedded in the motion. So now we can use the power of IClone and the ability to make changes and have those changes stay in place without having to worry about the transition between clips. So we're going to do the same thing we did before. We're going to come over here. We're going to find the point where we want them to start looking back, and we're going to double click on the motion layer, and you're going to see it sets up a series of keyframes for all the different everything you can modify, the heads, the arms, fingers, and then we're going to go ahead and have him look backward again. We'll use the orbit tool, and we're going to do this exact same thing we just did. Again, remember, you can slide these around as much as necessary, so don't worry too much about the exact position of where he's making the transition. You can make adjustments afterwards, but get him into the position you want. We want the head to look the other way. And you can see it's creating keyframes for everything we've changed. We haven't changed the fingers, so they're not. It's not generating a keyframe. If the fingers were in a position you needed them in, you can manually, by double clicking, and actually create keyframes for any part of the character that's available there. So there we go. He looks back, but now look at what happens with the merge clips. He keeps looking back. He doesn't return to look forward. Now, if I want him to return to look forward, I just come over to the edit motion layer and I click on the reset, and it'll reset him to look forward. And then I can determine how much I want to transition by just, again, dragging them around. But here, I want to add another motion just to show you. So we've got him, he slowly looks back, and then he starts bringing his hand up. It's just that quick. We made a few changes. You can have him pick something up, whatever you need him to do. And it'll auto-generate keyframes based on the movements you selected. And we can come over here, the edit motion layer. We can change the right hand if we want. There we go. And again, you can see all the keyframes we need generated. And it treats it as a single clip. So we don't have to worry about the transition between the clips changing what the character's going to do. So now we want to flatten all parts. Just right click to flatten and flatten all parts, because we want to embed those movements into the animation. And just to show you what I'm talking about, you can come over here. So I'm going to make, it's not really a practical, but just to make a point. If for some reason I wanted to put his arm in another position, you can see I can do it just like we would with any other motion, because all the other motions are embedded. So it basically, therefore, anything we take, it simply adds that motion to the existing motion. So in this case, if we move the arm up, it goes. But now look what would happen if we had left those other keyframes in there. The arm returns back to the position at the next keyframe. So then you have a transition between the one position and the other. So which is, if that's what you want, that's perfect. But if you want to just change the base motion and have it hold throughout, you can use the flatten clip to embed those keyframes, and then just, again, add that motion to the motion clip. So we're going to go ahead and sample the parts here. I'm going to show you another little thing. So you can sample every keyframe, it creates a lot of keyframes. For most instances, I don't find this of a lot of benefit. If we come over to the curve editor, let's take a look, and I'll show you the difference if you remember how the other curve looked. We'll have to zoom in here a little bit. Let's pick something that's got, here we go. And then we'll expand it out. You can see at every frame now there is a keyframe. And so essentially it samples every frame. I just want to kind of show that the optimize creates a smoother curve for editing, but if you need it, you can do it. I prefer I find it's easier to use the optimize. This creates the same curves, it just doesn't use as many keyframes to do it. And I think it ultimately makes for smoother transitions and easier to edit. So just want to show you that you can sample every frame if you need to, if you like have 2 or 3 frames that you specifically want to modify. Fairly straightforward. Other things you can do, you can just drag over and you can delete keyframes, and you can see here, let's just say you didn't like any of the movements for the right arm and you want it to hit edit motion layer. Let's just move the arm into whatever position. We'll use the orbit tool and just bring it into some sort of position here. Sometimes doing this can be good if we're using motions like he's holding a weapon or holding a torch or a light, and the motion that we're using as the base motion's got him moving his arm all over the place, but we really want it to just stay out in front of him. Well, we can use this by deleting these keyframes, and we can then change that motion, and now maybe he's holding a torch and he's holding it out in front of him. You'll still get some natural arm movement just from the movement of the upper body, because the arm will move with it, and you can add a little bit of movement throughout just to make it so it's not perfect. And you can see here, you can create, you can also see that you can create problems. We added 1 keyframe and the hand kind of shifted unnaturally. So have to be a little careful sometimes when adjusting these keyframes. Doesn't always do what you might expect. And we could use the curve editor to find out what's going on there. But again, I don't think it's necessary for this. Bigger point, what else can we show? And kind of undoing a few things. There we go. Just kind of get back where we were before we sampled it. Go and sample these again. Now we'll zoom in, and you'll notice when it does its optimized or by keyframe, every keyframe is on a specific frame. And so if you go to edit, if you go to a frame, it gives you what you want. So if you look at this tool here, let's look at this tool, the speed tool. So now let's say we want to speed up the animation. All we do is we come over here to the right and we can shorten the time frame or lengthen the time frame of the animation. And I want to show you what that does to the keyframes. So we've shortened it to 140 by 43%. Now let's sample the parts. We'll sample optimized, and then we'll zoom in here. So when you zoom in, I just want you to see that now you'll notice the keyframes are not, a lot of the keyframes are no longer lined up with the frame. And that can occasionally create problems when you're trying to modify your motions. Can result in sometimes jagged or unexpected results. So if one of the things that I always suggest is if you do change the time on the motion, the speed, if you right click, go ahead and sample all parts optimize, and after you've done that, flatten all parts, and now watch what happens if you come back and resample. Sample optimized, and everything's now lined up. All the keyframes now line up with frames, and for me, I find that's easier to edit Clearly not required, but I have run into instances where if the keyframes don't line up and I'm trying to make specific changes, especially if I'm doing them outside the curve editor, that I can run into a few problems. Just getting the animation to do exactly what I want it, but it doesn't prevent it from working. It just can sometimes end up with stray. I guess the best way to say it is you can end up with stray keyframes. So if you line them up, I think that's better way to do it. And then you can come in here and, obviously I'm just kind of playing around a little bit now, but you can make changes. You want them to look back, you want them to look forward. You can I want to show you can select a particular keyframe and you can drag it around and make a few changes here and just have him. And again, just by simply dragging keyframes and moving them around, you can it's too fast. So we can take that keyframe here for the head. We'll drag it over a little bit. We'll drag that one towards the middle so we have time. And now I can have him looking around, right? And you can play with the speed on that. But by simply dragging some things around and putting keyframes, you can see how very quickly we can, again, add a motion here by sampling all the keyframes and then playing around with the specific keyframes to get them where you want. Could do that in the curve editor as well, but that's a case where you don't really need it. And then you'll notice I always like to, when I'm done, I flatten the clip, and then you can see we can use the collect clip, and we can add these to our motion libraries, our motion plus libraries. We can export it to a character in the 3D Exchange, so we can save these motions if we want once you've got it correct. So if you're going to reuse it, save it, just give it a unique name. So really, that's what I wanted to cover in this, and thank you for watching, and I hope this was helpful.